Welcome back, eNCA, on this Saturday morning. I want to return to our lead story in which we're telling you that more than 4,700 employees of SAA are now being offered severance packages. Business rescue practitioners, I'm also told, want to complete the process by the end of the month. The editor of SA Flyer Magazine is Guy Leitch, a well-known commentator on the aviation industry, and joins us now on the telephone. Guy, good morning to you and welcome. What's your assessment then of this situation? Is this the end of the airline?
Yeah, good morning, Jeremy. Your assessment with Heidi was, I think, 100% on the mark. As long as government has no longer got any willingness or funds to fund the airline, it doesn't have a future. It's been drip-fed on in intensive care for the last 10 years. The situation is 100 times worse from COVID-19, so it has to have money to be able to continue. Unfortunately, the proposal on the table right now in terms of retrenchment package is also looking a lot like wishful thinking, because as the introduction remarked, it would require a sale of assets to be able to pay those severance packages, even if it was just 1 week for every year's service, which is quite low as compared to. And those assets are unlikely to realize any significant value, because almost all the aircraft in the airline are now leased, and the airline is hopelessly insolvent. Its liabilities outweigh its assets by a factor of about 3.
So where is the value, if any, in the airline, Guy? I'm thinking, for instance, of SAA Technical. I'm thinking of air chefs, for instance. Would those be considered assets and also sold possibly to procure that funding? Are those perhaps better or more viable assets, I think is what I'm asking.
Yes, but the number proposed of 4,700 retrenchments is only the South African Airways airline. It excludes the ancillary organizations like Mango, like Air Chefs and SAA Technical. Those together bring the total staff complement to about 9,000. Although they do have assets, they are seen to be viable at this stage and may be allowed to continue with at least only a loss of half the possible jobs. Mango certainly has an important role as a domestic airline in South Africa, and I think that should definitely be continued. There's quite possibly a good case to be made that SAA Technical can continue. Obviously, it needs to operate Mango, and it can continue to do maintenance work for the Southern African airlines. So I think there's a good case to be made there. But the sad truth is that there are other alternatives out there that haven't been really properly considered, but I don't think that the unions have really come to grips with the fact that there just is no more money.
Is there any way of someone throwing sort of the last Hail Mary pass here? Is there a white knight? For instance, we have been reading reports of an organization that's prepared to buy SA Express, for instance. Is there any way of saving this?
Well, I can't obviously rule it out entirely, but given the global situation faced by airlines, it has to be considered extremely unlikely. SAA has always been geographically disadvantaged because it is at the end of a spoke, or in the hub and spoke networks that have come to characterize airline transport. It doesn't have the natural advantages of, say, Ethiopian with a hub. And at the same time, the global airline industry is facing a loss in revenue of, at this stage, $320 billion, calculated by IATA, and it could get worse. So they're not likely to be in any mood to start making risky investments in distant, struggling airlines. So I honestly can't see much scope for redemption there. And even though there's a claim that there might be a rescuer for SA Express, again, that's very unlikely. SA Express doesn't have anything, quite frankly, in terms of assets worth saving. All its routes are currently being well operated by its natural competitor, Airlink. So I think there's just literally no chance at this stage.
Guy Leitch, I want you, if you can, to reflect on what is a very sad day today. Let's just draw breath here. This is a fine airline. It had, in its time, a very good reputation. It had a safety record par excellence. How did it come to this?
Yes, an extremely good question. There are any number of or causes that need to be reiterated. I think one of the things that needs to be understood is that SAA was never really a viable airline, even in the days when it was owned and operated by the railways, by, as we called it, spoories, and it was flying around the bulge. It was only operating or surviving on massive state subsidies to be able to do that. Then the environment it operated in became seriously deregulated. We got to open skies, and all of a sudden it was a free-for-all. And SAA was now having to compete against the rise of the super carriers like Emirates, the European carriers moving into their space in a big time, and the rise of local carriers like at that time Nationwide and then Kulula and so on. All that put SAA right up against the wall. And then, of course, we had this tremendously bad period since 2008 when Dudumiyeni was appointed to the board, and she came in, it seems to me, with a benefit of hindsight, with one objective only, and that was essentially to, if I can use the word, rape the airline for her own benefits. An airline is an incredibly difficult business to run. You can't run it with any form of developmental load or mandate, and you certainly can't run it if procurement is warped or crooked in favor of a certain group. It makes it hopelessly inefficient, and the losses become huge. And for that reason, the losses grew from about the 1 billion rand a year that it was operating on to 5 billion rand a year under the influence of Dudumiyeni, and that was clearly unsustainable. At the same time, it needs to be pointed out that the other big weakness was that the wrong people were being appointed to management. Quite frankly, cronies were being appointed to management who didn't have a good track record or knowledge of running an airline, and running an airline is a very technical exercise. You can't appoint people who don't know how to do it.
It's a sad day indeed. Thanks for filling in the gaps for us there. Guy Leitch, editor of SA Flyer Magazine.